This video is about replacing the oil pressure sending unit on a 2020 Cfmoto Uforce 800. I was getting false indications that I had low oil pressure. You don't see it in the video, but I did get a tester from Harbor Freight, put it on there, and it turns out the oil pressure is fine. It's just a sending unit. And a sending unit is only an idiot-like kind of thing anyway. So I decided to get a gauge, an actual gauge, and put it in line with the sending unit that came from the factory. You'll see how that worked out. A couple things that I want to discuss really quickly that are not in the video besides the pressure test. The center console, I removed it entirely eventually. Being one piece, it was a major pain. At this point now, I think you don't really have to do it. And actually, you'd be better off probably not doing it and fishing the wiring, as I suggest, over the console trunk, because it'll be kept nice and safe and secure there. So it's something to keep in mind. Other than that, you'll probably hear me huffing and puffing a little bit. What can I say? I'm getting older, gained some pounds from the COVID-19, not being able to do what I normally do. So I apologize if that's a distraction. So here we go. This is my 2020 Cfmoto Uforce 800. I really like the thing. I've already had it a lot of places, and I've made some modifications, if you could call them modifications. I put turn signals in. There's a video on that. A decent rear view mirror, fire extinguisher, hatchet, and I'm busy putting on things to hold shovels and such for prospecting and whatnot. Anyway, the first trip out I had what I thought was a low oil pressure situation, but I thought maybe it was just my imagination. Today it flickered on when I was just going down a level road at 25 miles an hour, and that got my attention. So what I'm going to have to do is pull this apart and get a Harbor Freight $30 oil pressure tester and test it, because if it's just a sending unit, I could take care of that. If it's in the internals of the engine, it has to go back to the dealership. And the reason I'm going to all this trouble is because the dealership is about 100 miles away. That's a whole nother story. So I want to make sure before I go and burn up probably what will end up being about $160 worth of fuel, because I'll have to take it up there and drop it off and then come back and get it and bring it home. And the aggravation of them probably just replacing the sending unit and sending me on my way rejoicing. So this is the step-by-step. Now you can see I already have the center console taken off. And from what I can see, the next thing that's going to have to come out are the seats, because the center console in here appears to be one piece. I don't even know how I'm going to negotiate the shift handle yet, but we'll learn as we go. Okay, the seat pivot pins are becoming more of a pain. I drove this one back and now it's blocking there, so I'm going to take that split ring off and drive it back that way. This one should come out fairly easy. You see that bar right there? Used to be one right here. I've been working around that thing and I'm sick and tired of it. So basically you've got one bolt here, two down here. You have to loosen this panel up to get at the bolts, so at least it makes it easier. And there's that mount pin there. Sprayed it with some WD-40 and it popped right out. Let's put it back in. So anyway, you remove that bar, and unless you're like 4'6", it'll help immensely at getting at everything. All right, see all those rivets there? There's rivets all over the place. There's bolts there, and this is all one piece of plastic. I just got done thinking rather rude thoughts to the engineers at Cfmoto. Why on earth could they have not made this thing in two damn pieces is beyond me. Unreal. I mean, I could see the sending unit down in there, but it's completely inaccessible. So the air cleaner's got to come off. God knows what else. Okay, after bolts here on the other side, and such. Air cleaner's off, and that's the intake to your carb, or should I say for the air induction. My suggestion would be to plug that with a rag. You don't want anything accidentally getting stuck down in there. Okay, as you can see, I got the console lifted up. The pre-filter here, take it loose, get it out of your way. You save yourself a lot of hassle. Maybe getting this driver's seat out of the way might be not a bad thing either. But at any rate, got it kind of up, and the stinker is right there. Yep. Okay, now in order to get this out of here, this union bolt's got to come off for the oil. It is a millimeter socket. You can get that out of the way and you can get a socket on here, because that pipe there is interfering just enough that you can't get a socket on this thing. Okay, I got all that out of the way and it's coming off. Now for your edification, the oil pressure sending unit is a 24 millimeter socket. The one large socket I just happen to have. And there it is. In all its glory. So now it's a matter of getting the testing kit and finding out what this thing is putting out. Okay, today is July 8th. It's been 1 month to the day since my last video. And the reason I've been waiting so long is that I got my gauge. It's an Alba gauge, and it's made specifically for very hard use. They claim it's bomb-proof. There's the part number if you want to get one. Anyway, it comes with a bezel, all the wiring. Comes with a wiring harness, sending unit, and the instructions, that piece of paper there. Got myself a brand new factory sending unit. Okay. And a couple of adapters that I needed to get, and this little guy. Now this screws into the block, and I'll be able to put both the factory sending unit on and the gauge sending unit on. The reason I'm going to all that trouble is because this machine is fairly new, and if I leave the factory sending unit off and something happens, it will give them an opportunity to deny any kind of warranty claim, and I don't want that to happen. So, the reason it took a month, I ordered that piece off Amazon and didn't realize it, but it was coming from China. That doesn't bother me. What bothers me is the fact that it has been stuck in customs in LA for several weeks. I got so fed up that I went ahead and went on eBay and found this one instead, and went ahead and got it. I still don't have the one that's supposed to be coming from China, and frankly, I don't expect to ever see it. At any rate, so this is the kit, and hopefully I can start progressing toward getting this thing on the road. Okay, the original idea was to actually use a new factory sending unit and use a T here and put the other sending unit on it. I waited for a month for this, and now I can't use it. Reason being is there's not enough clearance in here for all the sending units. That's the new gauge sending unit in there now. So this is the old wiring harness, which should not be used. I'm just going to leave it out of the way. When the engine's on, the light won't come on the dash anyway, so I don't really care anymore. I wanted to have both sending units on there in case something happened and Cfmoto couldn't deny a repair, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen. One thing to note, in the previous video, I had to remove this bolt to get enough clearance to get a socket on that. By the way, that socket is a 7/8 inch socket for that particular sending unit. There's two copper washers, one behind here and this one. And I almost did a fire up of the engine to test for leaks on this without putting this back in. So be sure not only to put that back in and torque it to spec, but make sure both of those copper washers are in place, or else you're going to have a mess. Okay, one of the reasons I'm making this video is so you learn from my mistakes. Okay, so this oil feed tube, alright, I already secured it before I put the wiring harness on. It wouldn't clear, so I had to undo it again. So depending on what kind of setting unit you get, you might consider putting that all together first before you waste your time having to unbolt that feed tube one more time. And when you put this thing together, be sure zip tie it. That's a fuel line, so it's very lightly zip tied to it. This one's more secure. Keep it out of the throttle cable there, and that way it won't fall against anything hot like that exhaust pipe right there. Okay, now to fish the wiring harness for the sending unit, I took a piece of bronze welding rod, coat hanger, whatever, even a tape measure, doesn't matter. Feed it down, tape it on, and then pull it through. You can see the rod down here. And all I have to do is pull it through. You'll have to remove the battery. These little things just slide in there. It's not that difficult. You can just kind of pull it off to the side. Okay, now it's fed through. Those pipes down there for the radiator. And I'm going to zip tie it here and here. Don't get cheap with the zip ties. You want to make sure that your cable is out of the way. Now, they certainly give you, let me get back here, enough cable to work with, so that's good. So where it comes up through the tunnel down there, zip tie it again, and we'll move on to installing the gauge, I'm hoping. Okay, this is what I did to hold the cable out of the way. You see those two holes? Okay, I drilled those and threaded, zip tie through, and zip tied it off down there. Now, all this having been done, an alternate way that I wish I had saw before, I probably would have drilled a larger hole here, here, and run this cable over this hump here, back out a little, and over here, because that sending unit harness is not that big, and it would have been better in that it would have been more out of the way of anything down below. So that's something you might want to consider if you're going to do that. Okay, this is where I'm going to mount it. There's a switch punch out right here. I want it there because actually with the steering wheel being where it's at, it's about the only place I could put it where I'll be able to see it most of the time. I was going to mount it on the center console down here, but I thought twice about it. It'd probably be better to have it up here. So in order to trace for the hole, this is the bezel ring for the gauge, and I just put it up there and used a felt tip marker and marked it out. And I'm going to get myself a semicircular file and cut that out and test it every once in a while and make sure the gauge is going to fit. Don't take off too much because you can't put it back on. Just go slow and make sure of your cuts. Okay. The Leatherman multi-tool saw was perfect for taking the majority of the hole out. And then I had this semicircular, or curved anyway, aggressive rasp. And let me put those down for a minute. And that's the hole I ended up with. I put the gauge up to it a couple of times just to see what might be hanging it up, and just gently carved out the hole a little bit more until it made a nice snug fit. And there it is. Now all I have to do is put the bezel ring on the other side. But actually before I mount it up, I'm going to feed the wiring through and plug it in, because I don't want to try and reach underneath this dash to try and make the connections. So we'll have to pull this back out. One thing to remember, these are going to plug into the back of the gauge. Be sure to put your bezel ring, or put the wires through the bezel ring here. Otherwise, you'll be having to take everything apart to do it again, and you want to avoid that. Okay, there our connections are made. Just push that through. Nice snug fit. That's really what I want. And there we go. And honestly, I have to tell you that the most difficult thing there was to do in this whole project was to screw that bezel ring on the back of the gauge. I actually had to reach in with my left hand to screw it down through here. Believe me, remove the battery or just get it out of the way without disconnecting it. You'll be much happier if you do. Anyway, I reached in with my left hand to screw it down and held it with my right. Now it's off center, so I'll just have to rotate the whole dang thing. But might be at this point a good idea to get a friend to hold the gauge in the right spot so you can reach under there and screw it down. I'm having to do this by myself, which leads to a lot of cussing and swearing and carrying on. But anyway, do yourself a favor, get a friend, your wife, whatever, ex-wife, enemy. It's worth it, and have them hold that gauge while you screw down the bezel ring on the back. Okay, take all that slack, coil it up, and zip tie it. And then there's a cross member here. Just zip tie the whole mess up to that. Okay, the next part is power source. This wiring harness is plugged into the back of the gauge. So you got a black ground, white is for dash lights, and this is the power source. It has to be on a keyed portion so it's off when the ignition is off. Otherwise the gauge will be on all the time and that wouldn't be good. As far as the negative is concerned, when I did my turn signals, this is the negative side. And basically what this is it goes into for the winch, but still that ties directly into the negative side of the battery. And I had a leftover leg from the turn signal. I figured I might have another project here, so I'll just tie into that and be done with that part. Okay, so instead of hooking up to this ground I got here, there's part of the wiring harness that wasn't used. There's a nice ground there, and this one here, this black and brown striped one, it switches on and off with the ignition. So I'm going to tie into that for the power source for the gauge. These wires here are incredibly thin, so if you're using blue connectors, something I might suggest is taking, in this case, a piece of lamp cord, and hopefully I'll get it to focus here. Come on. Kind of, sort of. Okay, so I insert both the wire I'm wanting to splice plus a piece of that cord in there, because the connector itself is too big and it's just not going to clamp onto the little piece of wire, and even if it does, the little piece of wire will probably get pinched off and it'll come out. So just kind of add a little filler there with another piece of wire. I'll probably cut that flush just to get it out of the way, and that way you don't have to worry about busting anything off. Okay, so you can see here, if it focuses, the stub of wire in there that I carefully trimmed off. And you can see down here, same thing I did right here. I doubled up some extra wire on it so it'll fit better in the connector and crimp properly. Okay, the power's hooked up. Everything's hooked up. So here goes the test. And it works. Okay, I'm all done. So the wiring harness is zip tied out of the way. Now, as far as the lighting is concerned, This is for the headlamps. What I had to do is disconnect that plug there and fish it back up through there to get at it. So what I ended up doing is stripping the insulation back on the brown wire, which is the parking light wire, and I spliced it in there, and that should be all it takes for it to work fine. Final thoughts: like any job, figure out how long you think it's going to take and multiply that by a factor of 3, 4 maybe, because this project took me about 5 or 6 weeks because I had to wait for parts and there are other problems. Also, leave your panels off as you go. Don't go start putting everything back together again, because I guarantee you the moment you go to all that trouble, you'll have to take it off again. You don't want to do that. Such as with the sending unit. If for some reason that unit leaked or something and I had the pan in for here, I would have had basically the job of pulling my own teeth getting it back apart again. You don't want to do it. So just leave everything apart until you're done and you make sure everything is tested. So if you have any questions or anything, please feel free to contact me. You can email me at kf7rcm@yahoo.com. Thanks for watching.